Welcome to Hope in the Face of Cancer, where we share real stories of courageous people in their cancer journey. In today's episode, we are honored to have two exceptional guests, Berit and Ann. Berit is a dedicated volunteer with CanCare, offering invaluable support to caregivers who are by the side of their loved ones facing cancer. Ann, a caregiver to her husband, Steve, has been profoundly impacted by Berit's support through CanCare. Together, they will share their heartfelt experiences, showcasing the remarkable strength, compassion, and hope that can be found even in the most challenging times. Before we dive into their inspiring story, let's take a moment to understand the roles of a caregiver and a CanCare caregiver volunteer. A caregiver is a compassionate soul who steps in to provide unwavering care and support to a loved one facing the challenges of cancer. The role is far more than just attending to their physical needs. It involves being a pillar of emotional strength, offering comfort and understanding as they navigate the complex and often an overwhelming cancer journey together. Through every moment of uncertainty and every small victory, a caregiver's love and dedication shine, making an immeasurable difference in their loved one's life. Caregiver volunteers like Berit play a crucial role in supporting caregivers along their cancer journey. Our caregiver volunteers have loved someone facing cancer and have chosen to extend their compassion to others in similar situations. They provide a listening ear, share resources, and offer guidance drawn from their own experiences. At CanCare, we thoughtfully match caregivers and volunteers based on shared experiences, such as pairing someone caring for a parent with a specific type of cancer with another caregiver who has walked the same path. This intentional matching creates a unique and supportive connection, ensuring that no one faces cancer alone. Now let's hear more from Berit and Ann about their incredible bond and the impact it's had on their lives. Well, welcome, ladies. We are so excited to have you on our Hope in the Face of Cancer podcast. And I know our audience is just going to love hearing your incredible story today. So, Berit, I'm going to start with you. You have a unique perspective as you are both a cancer survivor and have been a cancer caregiver. So, tell us a little bit about your personal journey with cancer.
Well, of course, I took care of my first husband with prostate cancer many, many years ago. 1995, it was diagnosed, and we knew nothing about cancer, and there was no internet and no information. All I had was a little brochure from the doctor's office about prostate cancer. And when he was diagnosed, it was terminal, and he had no symptoms at all. I just noticed that when he went to the bathroom, the flow was slower than normal. So I thought, well, his father had the benign prostate, then they did the TURP on him. So I thought, well, this is the age. We'll make your doctor's appointment, and off he went. And next day I'm a retired nurse, and I worked with the doctor. So I asked him while he was doing rounds the next day, well, how was it? Oh, he said, Finn was in great shape for his age, but he does have an enlarged prostate. And I don't know where this came from, because it was not a normal or common test in those days, especially not in a rural area. I said, did you do a PSA test? And he said, oh, I forgot. But I'm sure there's enough blood in the lab, so we'll have it done. So he calls me the next morning at home. It was the 4th of July. 11:30, and when the doctor calls you at home, it's pretty serious. And that's when he told us.
Wow.
That was that.
Yeah, that started your cancer caregiving journey. And then years later, you had your own diagnosis.
Years later, yes, in 2015, I was, after a mammogram, yearly mammogram, they called me back and said, we see something, you need to come in. And they did a biopsy, and yes, it was very early stage breast cancer. And they did the biopsy, and then they did a lumpectomy, and I was on radiation for 6 weeks. And that was it. So I
Wow.
consider it a very undramatic cancer. But it did give me, I mean, I understand so much more about what people are going through.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So at some point you decided to give back and become a CanCare volunteer. And it's interesting that, you had both the caregiver experience and the survivor experience, but you found yourself really being more of a caregiver as a volunteer. Tell us a little bit about what motivated you to sign up and to be a volunteer.
Well, during my radiation, there was a seminar in the hospital where I had my treatment for cancer patients, and I had never had any contact with real contact. I mean, as a nurse, I'd seen patients come in and out of the hospital, but it was not a lasting relationship. So I went to the seminar, and one of the speakers talked about CanCare. And I immediately felt a very strong urge that this is something I can do. And so I discovered that I had to be 6 months out of active treatment to take the training. And I signed up the first possible date that I could. And at that time, it was a 3-day training.
Wow.
And it was really an eye-opening experience because I hadn't heard the stories. I didn't know what other people had gone through. It was really a very important part. It was a life-turning event. But during the training, they put big pieces of paper up on the wall, and they had like different things you were supposed to stand under. Where do you belong? Anger or fear or all these different words that they had. And through that, several of the exercises like that, I discovered that I was much more a caregiver than a survivor. So that's what I do in my volunteering. I'm taking care of caretakers.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful for that. And I know our dear Ann is so grateful for that as well. So Ann, tell us a little bit about your journey as a cancer caregiver to your husband, and then ultimately kind of what brought you to reach out for support.
Okay. Steve was diagnosed with stage 3 prostate cancer 3 days before his 61st birthday. He had his prostate removed, but the cancer had gotten into the seminal vesicles. And
easy for you to say, I know.
Yeah, it's easy for anybody to say. But so he had to have treatment. He went through 30 couple rounds of radiation. And at that time, they considered him stable. So life went on. But before all of that happened, cancer, we had very young grandchildren. We have 2 sons and their wives, and the grandchildren were under 1, 3, and 4 years old. So there wasn't a lot of support that we had because the kids were busy. They were all working full-time jobs and trying to raise a family. And we had friends, but you can't reach out to friends to discuss this kind of stuff. Life is supposed to be happy and joyful, and it's hard to talk to people about, such scary things. Steve is not the type of person to worry, so I did all the worrying for both of us. It was dark and it was scary. We had not had a lot of hope. So one night I was sitting at the computer, I couldn't sleep, and I just typed in support for caregivers, and CanCare came up. So I filled out the application, and 2 or 3 days later, I got a beautiful letter from Berit offering her support to me. Through her letter, it was so wonderfully written and so caring that I felt that I had a friend and I would get through this. And she walked us through all the dark times, all the tests, with her positive attitude and her way of reaching out and making you think differently. It was like if something would happen, she would say this, say something that would make me think, yes, we can do this. And maybe this is the route that we should take. There's a religious connection between us, and that played a big part in our relationship.
Sure. It sounds like she was quite the lifeline to you when you needed it.
Yeah, she was what I called my Texas angel, because she came at a time when I needed her most.
That's wonderful. Well, Berit, what was the early days of your relationship like? I know that you've had many, many clients from, all over the country. But Ann, I think, was, early in your volunteering. So tell us about how that relationship really started and then how it evolved over time.
Well, Ann lives in Pennsylvania and I live in Texas, and that's pretty far away. She was, in fact, one of my very early clients. And at the time, I had email contact with my clients. I think maybe I was a little shy, maybe they were. And I know that with Ann, it started out with emails. And I've always done a lot of writing. So the writing came easy for me. And it was a way that I felt I could express what things that might help her through the writing. And she had beautiful responses, but it was all written to start with. And then after a while, I don't remember who of us it was who said it would be nice to hear a voice.
Yeah.
And so we started tentatively to talk. And I remember first time I heard Ann's voice, I thought, I like that voice. Yeah, I think I can get on with that voice. And then we started talking, and we never stopped since. We never stopped. And sometimes Steve would join in. I remember a couple of times I called and I hadn't said, we hadn't made a date, but I called and Steve would take the phone, and that was amazing because he might tell me things that maybe he didn't tell Ann, some of the things that he was worried about. And that was, to me, a plus, a real plus. Yes.
Yeah. So you were really supportive to both of them through this journey. I'm curious about, once you kind of broke out of the email routine and started to visit, did you find, Berit, that might have opened you up with your other clients as well? Do you find that now you're much more open to reaching out to them and connecting with them over the phone or on Zoom?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now I do quite a bit of texting, sort of in between calls. And that's sometimes people are busy and it's hard to do the telephoning, but we can communicate a lot on a text as well.
Absolutely.
And,
sure.
Yeah, I've learned how to do that.
Yeah, it's got to be challenging thinking about texting about such an emotional subject, but I think it's just knowing that someone's there when you need them in that moment, I think is incredible.
It's amazing how I've got two pretty serious clients right now, and whenever I reach out to them and just sort of encouraging or haven't heard from you for a while or something, I will get a response within the hour or at least the same day by text. So it's definitely a way to communicate. Yeah.
So, Ann, can you tell us about a particular moment or experience in your journey with Berit that had a significant impact on you?
Well, I think our whole relationship has just been wonderful. When Steve was going through chemo and our grandchildren were small, she told me to make memories, to photograph memories. And one day the kids were there. Steve was bald as I don't know what, but I have videos of him with the three grandchildren on his lap, and they were singing "Doggy in the Window" and "You Are My Sunshine."
Oh, that's awesome!
That I will treasure forever.
That's amazing. She's
been such an inspiration. A lot of times I think, boy, I wouldn't do this if it wasn't for Berit. We have friends that are getting older and they have problems And, I always say, reach out to someone, You can get through this if you have someone who has walked in your shoes. And until you talk to somebody who knows where you are in your life, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And she provides that light.
Well, I would imagine for you that it's changed you in some ways, even beyond this cancer journey, because you might have had some reluctance at first to reach out. And now after this experience, it's probably changed you a little bit in terms of your willingness to share with others.
Yes. We just recently had a neighbor who lost her husband, and she just is having a very hard time dealing with it. And I thought, what would Berit do? So I looked on the internet and found some scripture and sent it to her. And I texted Berit and I said, look what you did. I came out and I did this because of you.
So WWBD, what would Berit do?
Yeah.
Well, Berit, how about for you? I mean, is there a particular memory that was special for you, or a moment where you recognized the impact that you had on Ann's life?
I think it was when Steve wanted to become a CanCare volunteer. That showed me that what I had done had much more far-reaching. The little that I had done, the friendship that we had made or created had really far-reaching effect. But another thing was, when I was going through losing my second husband, it was not cancer, it was congestive heart failure. Anne and Steve were my support, which was
full circle.
Very special.
That's incredible. Yes. And I understand now that you are separated by many, many states, but Berit, you traveled up to visit even, and y'all had a little vacation together. Tell us about that experience.
Well, my daughter lives in Pittsburgh, which is 4 hours away from where Anne and Steve live. They drove 4 hours to pick me up to take me to lunch. That was the first year, and then they drove 4 hours back. The next year, they drove 4 hours to pick me up, and I stayed with them for several days, and then they took me to Baltimore Airport. And then last year, they came to visit me here in Texas and got to see the flowers. And in July, later in July, I am going to see them. So this is a beautiful friendship forever, and I treasure it. And that is one of the when I was going through the training, we were asked to think about the beginning of the training. They asked us to think about the gift of cancer, and I could just see people's faces around. How can that be a gift? But after hearing what the stories, and after going through this myself, and after being rewarded so many times, it can be looked at as a gift. I would never have had all this if it hadn't been for cancer.
That's a beautiful perspective for sure. So Berit, for our listeners, what strategies do you find most effective when you're matched with someone who is a caregiver to a family member or a loved one facing cancer? What strategies do you kind of find as your go-to strategies for supporting them in that?
The most important thing is listening. Just listen with an open heart. I always introduce myself when I'm addressing a new patient, and it's often by email the first time. But I am not a therapist, but I have a warm heart and a listening ear. And that's what you need. And patience, and try to figure out what they really need.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And for you, what do you feel? I mean, I can see the relationship and see the love between you now. Was there a particular kind of support, type of support that Berit provided in your journey that was the most helpful to you, maybe in some of the toughest times that you were having?
I think the best answer to that would be she was always there. Whenever I needed to reach out, she was there. She would get back to me very quickly. She didn't lecture. She just reaffirmed that I could do this, that I could be a caregiver, that we would get through this. And she just guided me along the way. I don't know if she realizes that, how gifted she is in guiding people, but it was just like I would be so stressed out and I would call her and I felt just a calm just hearing her voice. She's, just an amazing woman.
Yes, she is. So, Ann, as you think back to your caregiving experience with Steve, what do you think is, one of the most important takeaways or lessons, maybe something to share with our listeners about what helped you through that, besides the relationship with Berit, of course, but, what advice would you give to someone who's currently caring for someone today?
I would say keep the lines of communication over. Be honest with each other. Let each other know what is bothering you, what you're worried about. Have fun every day. Laugh. Put your faith in God's hands.
Yeah.
Because after all, we have no control. And just realizing that you're in this journey together. And if you do it together, you're building your relationship, your marriage becomes stronger, and you just have a better outlook and appreciation for life.
Absolutely. That's great wisdom. Great wisdom. Berit, I know that you said one of the greatest challenges for you as a caregiver was in the lack of information that you had. And of course, today we're in a different place than that. But any, from your perspective, as a caregiver, advice that you would give to someone caring for a loved one today facing cancer based on your journey?
I think if you understand what's going on, it's easier to accept it. I am not, as a nurse, I know I'm not supposed to give medical advice, and I try very hard not to, but I am able to tell my client, have you thought about asking the doctor about such and such? Or have you talked about this? Have you and your husband talked about it? Things like that. Because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
I think with my first husband, that feeling of total, we were lost because we knew nothing and there was no information. It was very frightening and I didn't realize at the time. And since then, I've learned and I've seen how important that is for myself and for my clients, knowledge and understanding. Because when you understand, it's easier to accept. Maybe you won't be quite as angry, even though sometimes you can be more angry because things. But I think knowledge is very important. Also, have fun, like Ann said. Take some time for yourself. Because if you're not doing well yourself, you can't take care of your loved one.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's so important too that as a caregiver or as a patient, that we're our own first advocates, that we're asking for what we need, whether that's information and answers from the physicians or, whether it's what we need from our family and how they care for us best or the need for a certain type of support, and just being your own advocate in that experience is so important. Berit, I'm curious, for those that are listening who, whether they're cancer survivors themselves or have been a cancer caregiver and might be hearing your story about becoming a volunteer, but think, I don't know if that's something I could really do. It's a little intimidating to think about talking to somebody else or, reaching out to someone else. What advice would you give them, if they're considering giving back the way that you have decided to give back?
Well, there's one word, and it's rewarding. Because yes, it's scary to go into even now when I get a new patient, or sorry, not patient, there's the old nurse, but a client, you don't know what you're going to be up against. And it could be somebody who is very angry, or somebody who is very scared, or somebody who is just doesn't know, so confused. And that's one of the first things you have to figure out. What does this person need?
Mm-hmm.
How can I? And by doing that, you're forgetting yourself, so that you can meet that person, trying to figure out what that person needs, how you can make a difference. And it becomes a purpose in your life. To me, it's become a real purpose since I'm now alone. And knowing that there's someone there that I might be able to help is a very comforting to me, and very purposeful, fills my life with more purpose.
Absolutely. You're getting a lot out of this experience as well as giving, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was it for Steve that made him say, okay, now I'm ready. I'm ready to throw my hat in that ring, become a volunteer. And what has his initial experience been like?
I think that he decided to be a volunteer because he saw how Berit helped me, and he wanted to pass that on to someone. He knows how upset I was, and that he couldn't get me through it because he was too close, and Berit was able to do that. So he just decided, after his last treatment, that he would become a volunteer, and he jumped in with both feet and hasn't looked back.
I love that. I love that. So what's on the horizon for you two, Ann? What's coming up? How, any fun plans with the grandkids, or what are you looking forward to doing together?
Our grandkids are into sports and acting, so we're pretty busy with them. And Berit is coming to spend a few days this summer, and we have some trips planned for the fall. So
that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to kind of look in the rearview mirror at the cancer journey, and I think it probably makes you cherish every moment on those vacations and with those grandkids in such a different way.
Yeah.
How about you, Berit? Yeah. How about you, Berit? I know you've got a beautiful garden, and what's happening for you coming up? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I have several trips planned. My children live so far apart. I have one in San Antonio, so I see him fairly often. We just went to Michigan together, which was great. And then I'm going up to see my daughter in Pittsburgh in July, and then end the visit by seeing Ann and Steve, and which is I'm really looking forward to. And then in August, I will see my son and his family in Tallahassee, Florida. And this year, my children have convinced me that there are airlines and you can rent a car. Because I have been driving before. So 3 years in a row, I drove all the way, and it's a fair amount. But yes, and I am thankful that I am healthy and strong and can do more or less what I want. And I hope I can do that for a long time.
Oh, yes. Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, ladies, I've been so inspired by your story today, and I know that our listeners are as well. You truly are hope in the face of cancer, and I'm so grateful for y'all sharing your story and for helping others through the experience. And I know that will be something that you'll do the rest of your lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hope in the Face of Cancer, a survivor by your side. If you or someone you know is facing cancer or is supporting a loved one through their journey, we invite you to share this podcast. Thank you for your support in our efforts in the cancer community. No one should face cancer alone.